So back in 2018, even before the Lordstown plant closure was announced, you said that, and I'm going to quote you, the region would be able to support the individuals who lose their jobs at the plant. And you attributed this to the business expansion work that the Chamber and others have done in recent years to diversify the economy. So Sarah, can you talk a little about some of those efforts that your organization has been engaged in to support businesses in the region?
I think that one thing that helped us is the fact that Valley companies, political leaders, economic development professionals have all worked collectively to diversify the community and our driver industries relative to their investment, the job opportunities, as well as the overall payroll to ensure that all of our residents have an employment opportunity. Because of this, had General Motors closed 20 years ago, let's say, the impact could have been much more significant to the automotive supply chain, as well as service providers. Many of the companies have diversified their own products within that industry, as well as the companies that they sell to or work with, so their customer base over the years. So certainly, we experienced a slowdown in many of those companies as a result of General Motors' announcement, but not necessarily a full closure for many of them. With the layoff of the second shift at the assembly plant occurring in the summer of 2018, when I'm quite certain I was interviewed for that statement, the third shift ending prior to that, the future of the facility was certainly unknown at that time. And since the closure, the dislocated workforce has had a variety of options that included retirement for those folks that were able to do so, taking advantage of transfer options that General Motors administration offered to all of their workforce in Lordstown, as well as seeking local employment elsewhere, in addition to the retraining that we're talking about today. I can say that in the immediate aftermath, the Regional Chamber worked with our colleagues in the chamber world and economic development throughout Northeast Ohio and Western Pennsylvania to create a list of over 100 companies that had open positions at that time, as well as conducted outreach directly to our organization and our peer organizations, seeking access to the General Motors workforce and the impacted supply chain. So they were ready and willing to hire those individuals. This list also included resources for education and training providers, as well as the Small Business Development Center and the Minority Business Assistance Center for those workers that maybe had an interest in starting their own business. There was also a significant community response during this time, many of which my peers on the call here, I'm sure, recall. For example, we had a local retail developer that presented gift cards to all impacted workers, and a variety of companies, businesses in the region that offered discounts, as well as a variety of services in other purchases that they were able to take advantage of. I think that one additional unique offering that we would need to certainly share this morning with a significant number of the dislocated workers looking at certificate and associate degrees, Eastern Gateway Community College during that time announced a free tuition program for all workers and relative to the assembly plant and the corresponding supply chain and service provider. So that was available to all of the impacted workers and their family members.
At the time, the coalition was working with local training centers to design programs to help workers who weren't quite ready to transition from GM to another plant. Can you speak about the efforts to help displaced workers who needed some training to find other employment?
For us, one of the challenges that presented itself is, because we know that there's such a high demand for these manufacturing workers, which is exacerbated by retirements that we're seeing now and in the near future. The headlines that come out of such an event like the GM closure became a real headwind for us. So as we're trying to get the word out in the community about the good jobs and career pathways that exist in manufacturing, it's difficult to, compete against the reality that, we did have some significant job loss there within those companies. So our focus was on really that big question, though, that you asked, which how do you help those employees that didn't have as high of a skill set? And that's really been the focus of our group, the Mahoning Valley Manufacturers Coalition, over time. So we represent a group of manufacturers who have organized really solely for the purpose of making sure that there's a really good connection between the demand that exists within our manufacturing base locally and our partners in education and training. So we've been working with our career and technical centers, Eastern Gateway Community College, Youngstown State University, and others to build a system of education and training programs that are really in tune with the competencies that are needed by our manufacturers locally, so that we really have high quality programs that also complement one another. So they're organized in such a way that somebody can get the skills that they need in a relatively short amount of time to enter into these jobs, but then also can continue their education and skill acquisition, that lifelong learning that you mentioned, and build skills over time so that they're also building their earning potential and kind of stacking those credentials on one another. And that's really what's necessary, what we're hearing from our manufacturers in order for them to remain competitive and to stay strong and grow. And so that's our continued focus. But the good news for the GM workers was that many of those programs were already in place. And so they were able to take advantage of them along with, some of the resources that Sarah mentioned through Eastern Gateway and other training providers.
For over a century, Farmers National Bank has stood strong. Through booms and busts, peaks and valleys, we've learned to know the seasons and how to grow in each of them. During challenging times, everyone is reminded of the value of solid relationships in both life and business. Farmers, stand strong.